Hi, Peter Boyles, the host of 710 KROS's Saturday morning show from 9 until noon. Of course, write the editorials for the Cherry Creek Chronicle and this most incredible project called The Shoot. And I want to thank Mark Crowley and Brian Taylor and, of course, Kelly Michaels for allowing us to do it. This may be the most important show in the series, no matter what we do in the future. And first of all, it involves this man who's my partner and a great friend, Brother Jeff Fott. And this goes back to Jeffrey and I talking about we should be doing some sort of television series about young people, only about young people. No adults in the scene, no reporter standing there at the crime scene, or just having young people be involved in television direct to people on the internet or on, of course, on cable TV. And Jeff and I initially spoke about, after the Q shootings, talking about young kids in transition and gay kids, and then we realized a lot of that was being done. The next thing we talked about was, I think, the most significant, important issue in our society today. It's young people and drugs and alcohol, the destruction of a culture. And I'm going to turn it over to Jeffrey and let him speak about where we've been and what we've done, and we're going to do some amazing people to you as well. So it is yours, sir.
Well, you know, Peter, being in partnership with you and all of the work that you've done in communications has just been amazing. Our friendship is long lasting. But what has been amazing to me is your story of recovery, your personal story of recovery, and the hope that you, show for a lot of individuals that are struggling to become sober. And in dealing with, our relationship and then beginning to talk about young people, we learned that young people are experiencing the same dynamics as older people as it relates to life in general, sobriety, drugs, alcohol, etc. And this story hasn't been told. I mean, when you think about drugs, alcohol, you think about abuse. I'm telling you, a 12-year-old is not coming up in your mind. An 8-year-old is not coming up in your mind. A family that has all types of means, and access to whatever you call a quality of life, substance abuse is not coming up in your mind. And then we stumbled upon high school, the 5280 high school that has young people that are all dealing with sobriety. And you take it from there, because that leads us to our incredible guest.
I want to thank Paul Scudo from STEP. And Paul said, oh, by the way, do you know there's a sober high school? And I was floored, because as a young kid, I started to drink at 13. So Paul makes an introduction call, and this is 5280 High School. They're at Lapan in Mississippi, and I have been so enamored watching the work that these people do. First of all, let me introduce to you, she is a physician and has an incredible story to tell. Dr. Melissa Moulton is our guest, and on my right is Keith Hayes, who's Director of Recovery. These are unbelievable stories. So, Doctor, thank you. And of course, thank you, Brother Man, for being here. I mean, it's important to all of us. And Jeffrey and I are doing this ongoing series that we have already spent, I think, maybe 8 hours with video equipment talking to these young people just simply by themselves in a room. And it's absolutely stunning. Doctor, tell your story, because you're really an amazing woman. So you're a Texas kid. Take it from there, if you would. Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys. I grew up in a small West Texas town and found my way into medical school here at the University of Colorado.
So first you went to Mines.
Yes, went to School of Mines. They gave me a little scholarship because I was from a rural county. And I like to ski, so I was like, sure, I'll go to Mines. And found my way to University of Colorado Medical School. And in my last year of medical school, right when we were matching to residency, I came into recovery from addiction myself. And there's a program in Colorado, Colorado Physicians Health Program, CPHP. And they assist physicians who are dealing with any sort of life issues. It could be addiction, it could be Parkinson's, something that may impact their ability to take care of patients. And CPHP helped me get sober. And they really opened my eyes to what what addiction is, what recovery is, and it really saved my life.
What was your drug of choice?
Alcohol mainly, but I was also abusing opioids because I'd had a surgery. About 6 months prior to this, I had a knee surgery, just an elective thing, and immediately got hooked on the pain medicine that my doctor
I
prescribed.
hear more and more people that tell that story. I mean, like the straights, the civilians.
Very
Not
common.
me, but the
Yep.
straights. And they go, and then I was buying drugs on the street. I mean, it's that quick.
It's a very common occurrence. And luckily, if it had not been for CPHP intervening, I stopped going to school. I kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. And if it had not been for CPHP coming in, who knows where I would be today.
So you become a physician, practicing physician, and then something happens.
I never even went to residency.
Yeah.
I put a pause on that, and it was just going to be a 1-year pause. I said, you know what, let me get my recovery solid. Let me just take a break from this. I felt like I was on a train. I was on this track, and I couldn't deviate. So I was like, let me just slow down a minute for a year. And I had full intentions of going to residency the following year. But I met a 16-year-old kid who was celebrating 6 months clean off of heroin. And I was trying to get sober myself. And I was like, whoa, this kid is 16. It just blew my mind that somebody that young would be dealing with something like a heroin addiction. And I was talking to him and saying, how did you do this? Because I was actually asking for myself. Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And he said, what made the difference this time was I had to drop out of school to get away from drugs and get away from those negative friendships that he had developed. And so I'd been an educator before I went to medical school. I think I had spent about 5 years in high schools before that teaching. And that it stuck with me. I was like, you know what? We shouldn't have to have that. Like, as a former educator, I was like, you shouldn't have to drop out of school to get away from drugs. But at the time, I didn't act on it. I was just trying to get sober myself. But over the next year, the idea for this kid just kept getting bigger and bigger in my mind. And after about 12, 18 months, I felt that this was my purpose to start 5280 High School. And I finally got to this place where I said, you know what? I think this is what I'm supposed to do with my life. So I quit medicine and started working towards the school.
Can I stop and just interject for a moment? Because that is the piece that I think was the amazing discovery, was there is a high school in our midst, in our city, that few know about, that's doing this amazing work. Can you just talk about 5280 High School as a recovery school or a place where young people are finding sobriety? Because that is the aha moment for me in this entire conversation.
Sure. 5280 helps kids in high school. So it could be 9th grade all the way up to 12th and even beyond 12th. Kids who are struggling with substance abuse and they need help getting clean and sober. And we do it through the context of high school. So they come to school. We're a regular public charter school. We're authorized by Denver Public Schools. We're free to attend. We serve any family whose child wants to get clean and sober, and we help them learn how to live in recovery as well as finish their diploma. And then when they graduate, about half of our kids go to college and about half of our kids go into the workforce. Whatever they want to do with the next steps in their life, we want to make it possible for them to do that living a substance-free life.
Let me introduce our next guest, Keith Hayes, who's Director of Recovery at the school, and what a story. And I turn it over to you. I mean, first of all, how did you two meet? How did you meet the doctor?
Well, we met in the rooms of recovery. And I think at the time, I had a couple of years sober when I first met Melissa. And she seen something in me that I probably didn't even see in myself. And she said, hey, I want to talk to you about an opportunity. And I came over to her house and we sat down and talked. And she said, hey, I'm looking for a new director of recovery at 5280 High School. I think you have a story. I think you can connect with kids. And I think you could be a valuable asset to our organization. And I was working in finance at the time, and I was well on my way in my career, and I was feeling good about that. But I had this burning passion, right? That no, God had something else planned for my life, and that is to work with young people. And I have been a Little League football coach in my past, so I've had opportunities to be able to work with kids. And I molded around for a while. I prayed and prayed around the idea of taking this role, and I did it. And it's probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life.
We have seen you in action. Jeffrey and I have been in the school and watched you in the hallway and watched you do your job. One of the things that we all tell, and there's a great line in recovery that we all tell the same story, we just tell it a different way. And even before we started today to film all of this, do this together, where was your moment? They call it, the clarity moment, the bottom. Sure. Where was yours?
Sure. So I was a 20-year drug addict and alcoholic, former gang member. I really was in that street life. I was really beaten down, broken, battered, right? I lost a wife. I lost my kids. I lost custody of my kids. They moved out of state. I had a house with the white picket fence and the wife and the couple of kids. Like, I had the American dream, and I gave it all away. I gave it all away for drugs and alcohol. And I didn't even realize that I truly had a problem. Even though everybody else around me would tell me that I had a problem, I could not see.
They had the problem.
Right. It was all them, right? Because what I'm really doing is I'm really good at doing this, and I really struggle with doing this. And I could not take accountability for my actions. And I could not own the fact that maybe I truly was an addict and an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. And I went to jail, and I became homeless, and I was living on the street. And I woke up one morning in 2017 in July in a park. And when I woke up that morning, the sprinklers is what woke me up, because the sprinklers came on in the park. And I said, I can't do this anymore. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I can't do this anymore. And at the time, I was on the run from probation. And I remember walking up to a 7-Eleven off of 6th and Havana. And I called my mom, and I had her come pick me up. And she took me down to go see my probation officer the next day. Look, I was ready. I had 2 pairs of socks on. I had a couple of pair of boxers on. I was ready to go to jail. And then I was going to figure out how I was going to get sober after I got done serving my time. And my probation officer, and I will always be eternally grateful to her. She said, hey, if you really want to get sober, if you really want to change your life, if you really want to do something different, I will give you that opportunity, this one shot. And I went to treatment. I went to the Denver Salvation Army ARC, where I found recovery and where I found connection, and I haven't looked back.
Wow. What's amazing about this, and I imagine the viewers are watching and they're saying, this is a powerful conversation amongst adults. What I've learned being amongst you all in this amazing project is this same conversation is happening with young people. I'm talking about folks who are finding recovery at 11, 10. These very same stories. Is it shocking to you when you find individuals like myself and saying, you know what, the story I just heard Keith share is the same story I just heard a 10-year-old have as well? Is that something that is awakening? You know what I mean? What are your thoughts around that?
It lets us all know that recovery is possible, no matter how old somebody is. And what it also further tells me is that kids are using drugs at younger and younger ages, right? And it's for a lot of different reasons, right? Some are not comfortable in their own skin. Maybe some are trying to figure out their gender identity and what that looks like. And they're not accepted by their family for how they want to identify, right? Maybe it's because they were bullied in school, in elementary and middle school, so they sought out drugs, right? This new youth culture that is coming up, and it's in the music, it's in everything. It's around using drugs and alcohol, right? It's about turning up, right? Everything has to be a party. And for me to be happy and to have fun, I coincide that with drugs and alcohol. And what we're seeing is our kids, their lives are becoming unmanageable at an earlier and earlier age. And that is what's helping them realize, I need to do something different with my life. This isn't working out. And I need to try to find recovery and figure out what that looks like, or I might not make it to age 16 because they've seen so many of their friends die as a result of an overdose.
When Jeffrey and I have been in rooms with these young men and women and just having them talk amongst themselves about themselves. And we get to interject a question from time to time. And Jeffrey and I asked once, we said, how many of you have attempted suicide? Every hand. How many of you know somebody that died? Every hand. And these are, you can, in adult AA meetings, recovery meetings, you can see that a bunch of 35, 45, 50-year-old men and women. Well, what's the youngest kid we met?
Well, 5280 high school is a high school. I want you to think about any school-age child you can imagine and step into that classroom. An aha moment for me when talking to these students, we were talking about stress. And I'm saying to myself, you're kids. What do kids have to be stressed about? Adults think about stress, but Melissa, I walked away and young folks were like, we have stress also. It could be the stress of maybe the cell phone is going out. Maybe my parents took away the PlayStation. Maybe it's a school test. But stress is stress, and everyone copes with stress in a certain way. Melissa, what role did you see about stress with young folks in the way they're coping with it via, drugs and alcohol?
Sure. I think everybody has stress. You don't have to use your imagination too much to understand that teens today are facing a very different reality than we did when we were growing up. But I think another word that comes to mind that resonates more is anxiety. I do think there is a sharp spike in anxiety among youth. And I don't know if it's because of COVID or what it's because. I don't really know, but we have many, many students, I'd say maybe over 90%, wouldn't you say, that identify as struggling with anxiety. And so it's something, whether it's stress or anxiety, there is this overwhelming feeling that I am not okay right now in this moment. And they can use drugs to relieve that and just ignore the problem, or they could just ignore the problem, right? And so part of what we do is we help them not use drugs as a coping mechanism because drugs work very well at reducing stress. It just goes away magically, right? But we also help them learn, okay, well, now that we've put the drugs down, how do you cope with that stress in the classroom? And how let's help you cope without the use of drugs. And so it's the long game that we play. It's not a rapid, quick turnaround, but it's a lifestyle.
One of the new headlines in local media is fentanyl death and what happens to young people and overdoses. The drugs that these young people have described to Jeff and I are light years ahead of me having a beer at 13. This stuff is, not that alcohol isn't dangerous, don't misunderstand me, but you're the physician in the line here. What the drugs that we have been told about, the drugs that you have seen, talk to that if you would.
Absolutely. I think probably the greatest example is marijuana. When we were growing up, marijuana had a very low potency, THC. It was grown, naturally, etc. Now, it's synthetically built. It's very high potency. They don't just smoke it. They make this synthetic wax and shatter is what they call it, that the kids are using, thinking that it's just marijuana, but they don't realize that this is very high potent, delivered in a whole, like the technology to deliver marijuana to your body today did not exist. It had not even been invented when marijuana was legalized in Colorado 10, 12 years ago. And so the evolution through the legalization, the evolution around marijuana has made it much more dangerous for kids today to use it. And that's just one example. There's a lot of other synthetic.
But their ability to obtain and the fact that they don't seem to be afraid of much.
No.
The one young man was describing one of the most powerful things that has been said since Jeff and I started going to 5280 was a young man in the room, and I said, I asked a gateway question, what's the gateway drug? The kid said, your friends. Your friends are the gateway drug. And I thought,
yep.
Isn't that true? It was true for me. How do you, and everything now talks about, drugs coming into this country and drugs doing this. But I thought, what you have offered, this is for real, is some part of the question answered. What do we do? Because it doesn't seem to be able to stop this stuff coming here. Just what do we do when it gets here?
Something Keith and I talk about a lot is we're not going to spend our precious life fighting the cartels.
No.
What we mean by that is like, I'm not going to spend my life trying to keep drugs off the streets, trying to keep kids away from negative influences, so forth. Like, what we're going to do is we're going to spend our life coming up with a solution that works. So when kids do get into trouble, they have somewhere to go. So I really respect people who do prevention and work to keep drugs off the street, but I feel like it's a losing battle, and we don't have time. We don't have time to figure out how to do that. Like, we can provide a solution right now for a hurting family.
This is one of the most connected men I know in Denver. He did not know, neither did I, that the school existed. How many of these schools do you think we need?
Oh, I think what we have discovered is a model.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there are people who come around ever so often that have a solution, they have a vision, and it fulfills a need. Melissa Keith 5280 High School is more than just a one-off situation. I think that you come across something that is going to feel a global need. And let me just tell you why. I never thought about high schools in the sense of every drug you can imagine is already there in all of them. There's not a good school, and there's not a bad school. There's not a good zip code. There's not a bad zip code.
Not rich or poor.
There's not rich or poor. There is a dynamic where drugs are ever present everywhere you go. And parents should know that when your child walks into a school, and we're hearing about student from 5280's high school students that are going into elementary schools that are being exposed to drugs that are there, vape pens that are there, going into schools where every type of drug you can imagine is available. The drug dealer is not that shady character in the shadows saying, "Hey kid, come." No, it's right there. And so what I think that we have stumbled upon, and what you all already know, is that problem exists. Now, 5280 High is an opposite approach to that. They know it exists, and they are addressing the dynamic of, here's what we could do about this. We open up the segment with, I had to get sober by dropping out of school. And so I think that is the crux of what we are seeing. A school that says, while the world doesn't see this or doesn't want to see it, we know it exists. So let's start working right here with these students. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a fair assessment. That's a fair assessment. And the power and the magic is with the kids, right? Because kids will listen to other kids.
Yeah.
If you come to our school and you meet a student there who has a year sober, and they look like you, and they talk like you, and they sound like you, and they have some of the same experiences that you have, they've dug themselves out of that hole that this other student is currently in. That's where the power's at. And they say, come on, man, come to lunch with me. Come hang out. We're going to show you what we did to get this time, right? We're going to support you in your recovery. We're going to connect you to other peers who also have long-term sobriety. We're going to take you to where we go hang out at after school, where it's a safe place where you can go and focus on your recovery, right? And that's the magic. It's the peer-based support from the kids.
Jeff and I heard talk about spending weekends together. It wasn't like you're going your way, that we spend weekends together to support one another, to stay away. And that's from old guy AA, like that's what we did, call a guy up, and you know the drill, we all know the drill. So, there, and again, using when Jeffrey and I, neither one of us knew that 5280 existed. And now it seems to me that every school district in Colorado should have at least one, maybe two. Denver probably needs 5 schools just like this. What holds it back? And by the way, talk about parents too, because that has to be really significant.
Yeah, gosh, there's so much to say. I think part of the reason people haven't heard about us is it took us a couple years, 2 to 3 years, to figure out how to do what we do. It's a very complex thing that we're trying to do because you've got not only the education piece, right? Running a school is complicated in and of itself, but the population that we serve has all these complexities. And some of it's recovery and some of it's mental health, and we need the clinical support, and then funding all of it, and all the things. And so it took us a few years to really do what we do well. But now that we're at a place where we figured it out, I too agree with you guys that we have stumbled upon a model that works and is needed across the nation. And I get requests to expand to other cities, I'd say multiple times a month. I mean, it's almost constant where I'm getting calls and emails and requests. And what we've decided to do for now is we want to make sure that we are serving every Denver kid really well before we expand. So maybe next year we'll start the expansion talks. But right now we are working out a lot of what you're talking about, the family piece, the parent piece. There is so much social stigma that still remains, especially in some communities, that we are working to break down those barriers, right? We can feel it now where our barriers are. It's not about marketing. It's about our societal, like how we view addiction, how we view mental health, and how people think that their kid needs help or not. To bring in the parent piece, one more thing I'll say is, because this is like a big question, but in our experience, we found that when we meet a new family, parents are about 12 months behind where their kid is actually at. They have a tendency, because they're the parent, to minimize, to explain away, to think it's just a phase. And so the parents are pretty out of the loop with what their kids are doing. And that's some of the hesitation of like, well, my kid doesn't need a recovery school because they're just smoking weed on the weekends. What they don't know is what the kids are actually doing.
Yeah.
So that's part of it.
The same thing, Terrence. I mean, you know, we're all seeing this from our own perspectives. How do you see this? I mean, in terms of your own life and in terms of watching the school grow, what are you watching?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I didn't really know a lot of sober people growing up. I didn't know a lot of sober people as an adult, right?
Nobody did.
I mean, this was the lifestyle that I seen from my peers, from other people, right? And I wish when I was in high school that this opportunity would have been available to me, because I showed in high school that I had addiction running through me. I was getting kicked out of school for showing up to school drunk or being high or something like that. And it would have been great to have this opportunity. But at the same time, like, our parents really don't know what's really going on behind the scenes. What I do a lot of times is I bring a
Keith,
family.
did your mom and dad know anything about your life?
Yes.
Private life?
My mom was in my business.
Yeah.
She knew I had a problem. She knew I had a problem. And she tried to give me some help. But I didn't think I had a problem.
Yeah.
So
His mom is special, though.
She is.
Very special.
She was.
Did your folks know?
No. Not even close. So, yeah.
I like, you know, what you said was that role model stuff. And one of the kids in one of the sessions that Jeff and I were in, they said they got their drugs from their folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that doesn't shock you.
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, the truth is my mom gave me my first drink, right? She figured, hey, if you're going to drink, I want you to drink with me.
Yeah.
I know you're safe. And she didn't know that I was going to become an alcoholic, and it's not her fault.
Well, you didn't start out to be.
Exactly.
You don't say that.
Exactly. And, you know, there was alcohol in the home. For me growing up, I seen the adults in my life drinking, and I didn't think there was any problem with it.
There was a young woman in one of our meetings, African-American girl, tell her story, because we both were knocked out by her.
Several stories, and the one that you're mentioning is, just imagine a young lady, a young student attempting to have her life go in a certain direction, gets out, heads to school, sees her mom on the streets,
Well, she's getting her brother and sister ready for
seeking
school.
drugs, and just the image of, I'm attempting to get my little ones. I'm doing the work of a parent, and then when I walk out the door, I see my parent out there in the throes of addiction, in all of those images
With men while she's getting
that you see. Just the psychological impact and the power of insight to say, I recognize it, and I made my way to 5280 High School.
I thought of everybody, and we're filming all of this, and this young woman's in the right corner and doesn't talk. She was silent for, I don't know, however long we were in there, and finally, why are you here? And she told this story that I cried. And she's being the mom of a family that we all use that word dysfunction, but this is like. And now she's got her feet on the ground, and that young woman's going somewhere.
And the power of it is, and I'm not in addiction, but my life is impacted by addiction. So you know what I mean? In terms of the school, is 5280 High School is impacting lives on multiple levels. It's like, yes, here's addiction, but here's someone I'm not in addiction, but everything that is about my life is I can relate to, and I need to be here so that I can, relate. I mean, there's so many of those stories. Another question that we were asking in those conversations with these young people is a conversation that everybody probably heard. Why don't you just quit? Like, and why don't you just quit? And the answer comes to this whole social thing of I can just quit versus addiction as a disease. Like, if I could just quit, I would just quit. What do you guys think when you hear that? Why don't you just quit?
Keith, you told the story about your children asking you, if you don't mind sharing that.
Sure. So for a long period of time when I was incarcerated, my kids had wrote me a letter in jail, and they asked me, Dad, don't you love us? Dad, why do you keep choosing the streets and drugs and alcohol over us? Why can't you just stop? And the truth is, I had lost the power of control. I have lost the power of choice. As soon as I got out of jail, even after I received those letters, crying in jail, soon as I got out, the first thing I did is I went to the liquor store. I had been obsessing and thinking about it the entire time that I was in jail, right? It's what I needed. It's what I wanted. It's what I could not stop on my own. I just could not. I couldn't stop for my kids. I couldn't stop for Denver Police Department. I couldn't stop for my mom. Everybody's begging me to quit. People are trying to do interventions with me, and I wanted no part of it because I cannot see my life without drugs and alcohol. And I'm so grateful that I got into recovery and I learned how to quit and how I need to go about doing it.
Medically, doctor, what Jeff's asking, treat it like behavior, you lose. Treat it like a disease.
Yeah.
Speak to that, please.
Yeah, I think the complexity of addiction is really infinite. There's no one way to handle it. But I think my story, I have a similar part from my story that I think I'll share. It'll bring some color to it. I was, physician, trying to go to medical school, went to treatment, CPHP, all this stuff. And then I was free from drugs and alcohol. But over time, my self-will and my ability as a person to resist the disease of addiction slowly diminished over time. And I find myself with maybe 9 months of sobriety. And I finally gave up. I said, I'm going to go get high. But at that time, I'd been sober for so long, I didn't have a way to get drugs. So I just said, I'm going to go downtown Denver. Let me go find some drugs.
You find some down there.
Yeah. I mean, the people who know me now, when they hear the story, they're like, what? So I went downtown, parked my little BMW car down there, went to go look for somebody who I thought could help me out. And I saw some people and I was like, there they are. I'm going to go talk to them. And I'm waiting for the light to turn red because there's cars going. And the moment it turned red and I stepped off the curb, my phone rang in my pocket. And somebody that had never called me in my life picked up the phone and I said, hello? He said, hey, Melissa, God told me to call you right now. This is a true story. True story. And I stopped and I didn't cross that street and didn't do what I was planning on doing. So like even that's a little bit weird of a story.
No.
But for me, even as the successful physician person that I was, there was an end to my ability to say no until I started replacing that disease of addiction with a more meaningful relationships, career path, a spiritual life. So that was the moment for me that I never looked back. So Keith woke up in a park and said, I'm not looking back. It took me a while to get to that point, but I think we all who are faced with the disease of addiction, we all have a moment where we need to say, I'm not looking back.
Here's one of the things that really sticks with me in terms of 5280 High School. And it's filled with joy and hope and promise. And one of the questions we were talking about is, well, what did you replace all of that with? And to see young people and a staff that has the same level of joy, accomplishment, looking forward to graduation. I saw students that were preparing to help others graduate by looking at venues. And in that building, there's a lot of joy as well.
There's a vibe in that school.
Yeah.
There's a sense of that school. There's a zen of it. And the first time I walked in, and I thought this is one off. And then the more I understood it, it was like, yeah, this is like going to a big York Street. You know, it's like, and Jeffrey's right. I mean, we have both been stunned by it, and we talk constantly about this school. It's 52. Give all the info so people can contact you
Sure.
and find you.
Sure. 5280 High School. We're at 1200 West Mississippi Avenue in Denver. Our phone number is 720-919-1056. And anybody who has a family that may be interested in coming to check it out, just give us a call, set up a tour with Keith, and come check it out.
Anything you'd like to leave us with on the show?
I mean, most of anything, I just want to give some families out there some hope today. That even though it may look bleak, maybe your kid is struggling, maybe your kid has had maybe problems with the law, whatever the case may be. Just know that there's hope today, and that we do recover, and that no matter how deep the hole is, it does not mean that we can't come out of it. And that's what our school is here for, to serve the kids in Denver, to let people know that we do recover, that there's hope, and that we have a community that we've created and cultivated of joy and meaning, of authenticity, of equity. And it's very important to us that we serve as many kids as we can and help them in their journey.
What do we do?
Well, I think that, we've stumbled upon something that was already there that we want everyone to know about. And I think it's the right time to address these difficult issues. It's a political season. Everyone's talking about what they will do and how they will do it. And many of them have no idea what's already being done. I'll just leave with the student who said, we asked the question, why are you sharing these stories with us? What would you like individuals to know or do? And that student said, if one young person gets into recovery, or if one young person decides not to get involved with drugs and alcohol, then everything that I'm doing is meaningful. And I carry that forward, the power of one.
One of the things that we had to do was get parents to okay their children being with Jeff and I, and they signed waivers, and they did it with pride, which was so over the moon for me, because people say, oh, my kid's playing, high school baseball, or he's on the debate team, he's going to go to Harvard. These people were so thrilled that their children were sober. My brother Jeff and I are going to continue. We have, we could call it a documentary, which is probably the correct way to say it, but we're going to do day to day, and we're going to present this because this is the opening round, to have you meet these remarkable people that run this. It's 5280 High School. It's on Lipan in Mississippi. And if you have a son, a daughter, a grandson, a granddaughter, somebody in the niece, a nephew in the family that you know is in trouble, it's a wonderful place to go to get info, because it was like walking into Step 13 the first time before it became Step Denver. And you knew that miracles were happening in here. The miracle of gaining sobriety, which changed my life. And so these are remarkable people, and this is a great partner. Thank you for watching this. This is just round one. But again, 5280 High School. You find them on the internet, get their phone number. You can ask for Keith. You can ask for Dr. Melissa. Jeff and I will be there. We'll continue it going on. See us Saturday morning at 9 o'clock on 710 KNUS. Mark Crowley, thank you so much. This was a lot of work. Take care of you guys. Take care.